Hey, Peter Lynch. Thank you. When Jacob actually was talking about, Jacob Tutt, he was actually talking about what we're going to do on Canada Film Day. And he just asked me, he said, what do you think of doing Project Grizzly? And that kind of blew my mind, because I just thought, I've known you for a long time. I know Project Grizzly, and some young guy who owns a cinema remembers it too. And it came out, and all of a sudden it was like, oh, what a great idea. And then to have a great big audience come and see it again on a big screen. I don't think I've actually ever seen it on a big screen. I think I literally probably saw it, probably rented it on like NFB, tape, renting a VHS or something like that. So it's such a thrill to have you. It is such a great film, like such a good such a great profile of somebody and their passion. And there's a lot of humor in it, of course, in that, but there's also a lot of humanity in that too. And like when you started going at that, you had to actually, it's a bizarre story, right? It's a bizarre thing, like, oh my God. So how do you keep the humanity in it?
Well, thanks for that. And before I start, I wanted to thank Jacob for making this happen and being able to show the film in such a beautiful theater as the Playhouse in Hamilton. I don't know, I always say that you have to be kind of as crazy as your subject. So you can't place yourself above your subject. You have to find a place in them. And I'm like this kid from Toronto and hanging out in cafes, reading the New York Times, but I also grew up playing hockey, and the Don Valley was my place of wilderness, both for my imagination, but also I always developed this philosophy of filming that it's like trying to return to the Don Valley as a kid, playing down there, building forts and bonfires and testing myself. And so I could always relate I had to find myself in Troy. And as an artist, trying to make films in Canada, it's almost impossible. So I could identify myself in his impossible quest, and we all have unconsoled dreams, and so I found myself in him that way.
And your background, like, which I only think I've only known in the sort of the last little while of that, filmmaking's a part of what you do, but you've worked very much as an artist. Like, you've worked very much as, you've done installations, you do other contemporary forms of art. Is that true? And has that always been a part of?
Well, before I started making films, I produced an international video festival, and at that time I had desires. It was called Video Culture. It took place in Toronto in the 80s. And at that time I had aspirations to be a filmmaker, but I didn't really know how I would do that. So music and art was my way into filmmaking, and I kind of programmed my heroes, and those heroes became my mentors, and finally got the gumption to start making films. But I started that way. But even Troy, I identified with him as a kind of performance artist as much as he had his own inventor side.
I want to open it up right away to get the questions going on. There we go. I didn't have to go very far. Go ahead. Just speak really loud.
Hello there, sir.
Hi there.
First of all, I just want to say it's an honor. I learned from my father that Troy's father was my father's English teacher. Very
Amazing.
Anyway, I hope to be a documentarian going forward, and I'm particularly interested in the realm of editing and post-production. So, what would you say were the most sort of inspired, delightful editing / post-production moments in the making of this film?
Interesting. Well, sometimes it's what you don't show gives something its power. So for example, the time that he was in the tent and it was becoming dusk and he started telling how fear is the mind crippler, we originally shot that where you could see him with a gun, and I did coverage of that. But we realized it was much more powerful to not show that. And so it's withholding certain things that are easy to show things that are funny, that are, it would start to border on making fun of him. It wasn't my reason, so it's learning how to withhold, I think, because signs are like, say, go or stop, but art is about what you don't show, not as much as what you show. So I would say, and we were really interested in trying to find a way to depict his inner world as much as his physical quest. So, for example, when it started to snow and he was doing the shaving with the knife, for me it started to be a journey inward, and so I tried to find visual ways to look for ways to show his inner world, not just the literal aspect of his physical journey.
Very well put. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Let's go for another question here. Yes?
So the first 10 days of filming was in North Bay, Ontario, so like where he was testing the suit and the logs. Though the stock footage of coming down the mountain was in Hamilton. Yeah, so mostly in North Bay, and then 5 days in the Rocky Mountains, and it was about 50 miles north of Banff in a park. Yeah.
You were there the whole time, obviously, in that.
Indeed.
Are you staying, like when, I think when with the snow, when he's standing there and he's talking, you're literally just back there or traveling around where you?
Well, that story for me, so before I made the film, my kind of inner guide was I did about a 3-hour interview with Troy up in North Bay, just with a high-8 camera, and I wrote it out almost like a screenplay. And so I saw there were certain recurring stories that he would return to, and they would, no matter what, they seemed to be irrepressible. They would just bubble to the surface. And we were at a point in the filming where he was not getting along with the mountain men, the guides up there. There's like too many mountain men on one mountain sort of thing. And they were not like dressed in romantically like in buckskin. They had like beaten up Adidas and stuff like that. So they didn't, baseball hats, they didn't look, so, and he was running out of cream for his coffee. He was running out of his brand of cigarettes, and things were not going well. So we were in this bush and it started to snow, and I went to Troy. I said, Troy, isn't this like where you met the old man? And it was, my crew were even getting cynical. They wanted blood, they wanted like, let's get it on. Wade didn't come here for this, So, but Troy started telling that story, and when he did, everybody standing around, you could hear a pin drop. Like all of a sudden, we were all back on the quest. I was back in the Don Valley when I was 10 years old playing, Huckleberry Finn, and he brought us back to the dream, and that was something I wanted to keep going. But that became this sort of center of the film for me, the core, emotional core.
Great, it's really well done. It's like, it feels, I was watching it, and I've seen it, so I was kind of watching the filming of it too, and just seeing you're shooting with one camera, and how it actually worked well with the zoom. Like it really told the story really well. It's great. That's good. 10-minute reels.
Yeah.
I got to it.
And then when it stopped, everyone goes, get the reel, like people just.
Yeah, it's not like video these days where you can just keep going on for hours and hours. No, you got 10 minutes.
Yeah,
that's it. That's right. We got questions? Yes, back there, Red.
This one's a bit of a two-part one. One being how is the suit, and second part being has anyone picked up another torch, please?
How is the suit? So the interesting thing for me was how the suits are not in order. So this is the Ursus Mark VI, but the other ones, it's not in chronology. The other thing that was interesting, when I first met him, he just had the arm, and he had one of his, one of his guys in his group start hitting him in the arm with a weightlifting metal bar. And I realized, oh my God, this guy, I've got a story here. But when he showed me the arm, he had these water wings fell out. But I realized what I loved is that he was resourceful in using homespun materials. Like there were water wings in there. There was, gaffer tape. There was, plastics from hockey equipment. And there was something so quintessentially Canadian about it, this makeshift thing to survive nature. And interestingly, he won this at Harvard, the Ig Nobel Prize for engineering. And when he was asked by one of the engineers, what is the main structure and what's the main material of the suit? And he said, gaffer tape. And en masse, all of Harvard Engineering School stood up and gave him a standing ovation. And it's that resourcefulness and necessity and desire and that unconsulted, it's the inspiration, the ball and string kind of crazy inventor aspect that I think I could identify with there. The second part, the suit right now sits in the library in the archive at TIFF. And so they bought it to keep it, so it's safe. And but after that he built a number of other suits that were moving on to other kinds of quests.
He never returned to the the Grizzly quest. Is that?
I don't think he gave it up in spirit, but the suits I think became higher tech. More, other. He had other.
The
quests.
2000s happened and we had technology.
Exactly.
Gaffer tape was replaced.
Yeah.
That's great. I was kind of curious. It felt like what was that rubber coating all over it, right?
Yes.
I mean, it almost looked like plaster, but
it was like a rubbery.
Rubber.
Yeah.
Okay. Was there another question? Yes, right here. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm assuming you spent a lot of time with him, and he seemed like a larger-than-life personality on the screen.
Can everybody hear this?
No.
Thank you. I'll try not to fall down. Thank you. I'm assuming you spent a lot of time with him, so you might have gotten to know him a little bit. And he seemed on the screen to have a larger-than-life personality. What was he like when he wasn't on the screen? And what was his personality?
So, I didn't interestingly, the film happened very quickly. I was showing a short film I did called The Arrowhead in Spain at a festival in San Sebastian. I met a producer from the film board, and he saw this film I made, and he said, I think you might be interested in this guy. So he gave me a book that Troy had written called White Tape, which is a rant about why the government never funded the suit and things like that. Any good visual artist and filmmaker would do. And so then I went up north and did this, I think he said about a 3 or 4 hour interview with him. And I wrote a treatment on a weekend based on that. And the film board greenlit it right away. And I was filming within a month of when I first met him. So then I shot 10 days in North Bay, 5 days in the Rockies, and 2 pickup days. So I didn't really, interestingly, but when you spend time with Troy, it's mythic time. And instead of on a Friday night going to watch Terminator 2, he's going to the dumps and making his own movie. You know what I mean? And that he has this quest-like quality that steps. I didn't want to make, say, like a PBS documentary where you explain why, because if a straight journalist tries to interview Troy, he'll just spin their head around, because he'll just tell them things that they're like impossible to fully explain, and I was interested in the story behind the story, and sort of stepping outside the facts and ruminating on a larger kind of storytelling, not just like an accounting of what he was doing. So, but he was a larger-than-life character. But he had a slightly, let's say, when he was on, he was really on, and then he would disappear, and we'd have another shoot set up, and we'd go, "Where's Troy?" He's going to have a steak at his mom's. So I'd have to send somebody to go get him, right? And sometimes he could swing to almost a depressed state, like he was very up and down when we were filming. So near the end, when we were filming the grizzly bear, at one point he got so pissed off at the mountain men that he basically went back to the car and basically told us all to F off. And so I got an Arabian horse, and I've only ridden horses a few times in my life, and I literally galloped along the edge of a huge cliff that was like 500 feet down, and went about 2 miles back to the parking lot where he was. He was sitting having a smoke, and I gave him a George Patton speech like, Troy, you've got 7 damn good men out there waiting for you on the hill. The old man's out there fucking waiting for you. We've got to do this. And he's like, he's out there, man? Like, I said, yeah, he's waiting for you. Like, so he goes, oh, okay, bud. So we get like on the horses, we go back. And at the base of the hill, we get off on the horses and they're waving, like going, the grizzly's there, the grizzly's there. And Troy was like so possessed that he just literally with his bucks like walked right up the hill and I could see the grizzly behind going, like, who's that? You know, like, so we were right in the zone of that grizzly. So it was, the stuff that happened in between was as crazy as what you saw on the screen, right? So it was like something incredible, you couldn't make it up.
You were just at the right place. You just really, you're like, wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible. You can take another question here. Got a hand up, is there a hand up? Yep. Where? Oh yeah, please.
Did you ever get into the zoo?
I did try I tried getting in, and I wouldn't be able to stand it for a minute. Like, I can understand, like, and also like him being claustrophobic and kind of like hating getting in the suit somehow seemed poetic to me. But yeah, it's an awkward, it feels awkward, but I guess it's like a shoe like that doesn't fit if you don't, you know, if it's not made for you. I wasn't the exact size, but it would have been terrifying for me to be inside that suit.
Yes?
Peter, did you ever feel let down? You got all your footage, but there was no bear attack against Troy. I know it was sort of an unscripted film in the sense that Troy's this fantastic subject, but you got all your footage and then you're back in your studio thinking, didn't get a bear attack. Like, did that hurt you?
For me, the story really was the quest, you know? So for me, quests are not in the finding, but in the journey. And so I feel that strangely it's more poignant and powerful in terms of his story. Like maybe if you're making a Hollywood film, you'd want to have the bear encounter. But in this, the bittersweet aspect of the failed adventure adds to the poignancy and, you know, becomes a more complex portrait of him. So in a way I had to, as I realized I didn't have that, with the disappointment happened up in the Rockies. You know, like when you realized this probably is not gonna happen the way we thought it would, but in a way in the editing, that gave it something more to build, like internally to build on. So that's how I feel.
That's just the sign of a good storyteller, good
Yeah.
filmmaker is, and also especially in documentary where you're basically that's your risk.
Yeah.
You're making a doc, you're going out there, you don't know if it's going to work.
Yeah.
It's not a PBS doc.
Yeah.
The story has not been fully told yet,
Yeah.
right?
In a strange way, it was like Troy was like a dancer, let's say, that had this performance, and we went up in the Rockies and tested that idea up in the Rockies, right? So none of us knew how it would work. But when I saw him walking in the biker, you know, in front of the strip bar, and it was flat, and I just was walking and watched, and I was like, oh, I don't know how this is going to be in the Rockies.
Yeah, he can't get the, you know, country time donuts or whatever, country style. Yeah, and I was going to say, like, that was I found when you saw him with his mom and when you saw him with his friends in the country style donut place, he felt like, I knew he's certainly liked to be the center. of the conversation. But he was with his friends. He was with people who,
For me, yeah.
you could see him, right?
For me, that was like the Knights of the Round Table location. You know?
Okay. And I have to ask you about the, what did it feel like when The Simpsons took this on?
I mean, yeah, I mean, it's quite a compliment. I was in this bar in Kitsilano. I was at the Vancouver Film Festival, and there was a bartender that showed me a picture from the Simpsons image, and she said that Matt Goring it's one of his hangouts that he goes when he was in Vancouver, and she mentioned that he was a Project Grizzly fan. But then it just, yeah, it was, I mean, it's quite an honor feels like you're in the sort of the pantheon of pop culture to get.
You're only one of 2 Canadian films that, kind of got that.
But
right?
the strange thing about this film is it feels like it's no longer my film. Like it
Yeah.
feels like it's taken on a life of its own. Like
No, but you can be proud of the child.
Yeah,
You can be proud of the child. That's the cool part of that. I'm gonna take one more question, and then we're gonna. Yes, right back there. You get to yell it out.
Yeah, tell us about the premiere and how Troy and the group reacted when they saw the film.
It was at TIFF. It was a stormy night out at the Cumberland, which is no longer there. It was 1996, and Troy brought the suit up on the stage, and it was like a rock and roll show. Like it was like something I've never there was an electricity in the air, and he was there with some of the key guys from his gang, and yeah, there was kind of delirium, and I remember we went to a party at the film center the next day, and Troy was walking around in his buckskin and everything, and at one point he heard I think it was Al Pacino was supposed to show up, and he became preoccupied with that, and he was at one point I was standing talking to Jean-Luc Godard, and then he didn't couldn't care less who he was, and then Norman Jewison came up to him and goes, "Man, I love this film, man," and he didn't know who Norman Jewison was, but he was going, "Where's Pacino, man?" He was really upset that Pacino he couldn't find him. And then just as we were about to leave, David Carradine from Kung Fu was wearing a buckskin jacket, and he saw Troy and he ran up to him and kissed him.
Oh man, that's sick.
But to answer your question, it was complete delirious mayhem. Yeah.
That's so cool. That's a great moment. Okay, so great film, great filmmaker. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.